Morning, everybody. One of the challenges of going last in this session is, first of all, I'm keeping you from coffee. So I'll try and perhaps give a little bit of time back. And secondly, some of what I wanted to cover has already been covered by my industry colleagues here. But hopefully that gives me an opportunity to focus on some of the areas that haven't been covered. And in fact, Veridos gave me a nice intro here about the stakeholders involved in what we do. And that's really what I want to cover today, is how does all these individual components, some of which you've heard about today, how does that come together to enable digital pre-clearance that benefits us all? Again, the stakeholders, whether it's carriers, airlines, crews, government, travelers, business people, tourists, etc. So that's what I want to try and cover in the next 50 minutes. As I say, I'll try and give you a couple of minutes back, because also, as the chair said, we'd very much like you to come and talk to us, ask us the questions, so we can help deliver these solutions that benefit all. So SITA works with about 70 governments around the planet. What we've done over the recent years is talk to them about where they see the future of border management. What they come back to us pretty consistently is around the idea of a digital border. And they came up with this pyramid approach, and we've helped them develop this analysis. I'm not going to go through this. I have spent about 2 hours talking about this pyramid with some governments. I only have 13 minutes left, so I won't be doing that. But at the peak, for almost all, as we've discussed today, is this approach to a seamless journey. And that doesn't matter what the object is, whether it's a traveler or a bit of goods and freights. Borders need to be able to offer a much more seamless experience to them. They can only do that if the checks are done before the object departs. By its very nature, if you start doing checks at arrivals, in the immigration hall, at the port of entry, that is no longer a seamless journey. So we need to find ways of carrying out this digital pre-clearance. To do that, it's predicated on good quality data. Indeed, at various conferences, and I know it's come up here as well today, the quality of self-entered advanced passenger information, of advanced cargo information, if it's self-entered, the quality can be suspect. And that leads to challenges around the actual digital pre-clearance. Now, this is where digital travel credentials and ICAO's work to standardize has really helped drive forward not only the quality of the data, but then have this approach towards a digital identity. And that digital identity, if it's backed by the security of passive authentication, of ICAO PKD, enables the border agencies to have confidence in the data that is being submitted to them, and therefore more confidence to digitally pre-clear. I'll touch just briefly on dynamic borders, one of the other elements that border agencies around the world have discussed with us, and I'll touch on it later as well. It's that ability to flex, to change as demands, as risks, as threats change. We all experienced this during COVID. With some of our government customers, we would change policy, change admittance processes a couple of times a year. During COVID, we were changing them a couple of times a week. We needed to give that dynamic capability to borders. Hopefully, we won't have another pandemic for some time. You can guarantee it will. But threats are changing daily. And therefore, we need to enable those tools to dynamically adapt border rules, boarding rules, such that we can still maintain this digital pre-clearance and we can maintain a seamless journey approach. So let's dive into more of the travel authorization. And again, some of this has already been covered. We really sort of select in 3 different pillars again. The first one, the one in the middle, is I think the one that is most relevant and most experienced by people, an electronic travel authorization. Now, there are various versions out of this, and I know ICAO are looking to standardize digital travel authorization in various working groups, and I'm looking forward to helping and hopefully participating in those. But electronic travel authorizations are that ability for a system-to-system verification of the information submitted. If you're part of the visa waiver program and you traveled here and you applied for your Canadian ETA, that's a true ETA, a system to system. You weren't actually presented with anything that other stakeholders had to check. We really encourage this approach because it is truly the seamless approach. And I'll come on to how we can make it completely invisible for everybody, apart from the authorities who finally issued the ETA. I'll come on to that in a moment. Digital travel authorization there on the left-hand side. This should be a true e-visa. Now, I spoke to colleagues at ICAO who advised me not to use the term e-visa because it's so misleading sometimes. And I sort of agree. There are e-visas out there that are really nothing more than a PDF with a barcode on it, and a barcode that is only relevant to the issuing state. So there's no verification possible. Really, they are a way of earning some revenue. Nobody disputes that. They're a way of doing some form of checks. But if the stakeholders involved in the process of getting you from A to B can't verify the authenticity of that ETA, we still run the risk of somebody arriving in country and being denied entry, and then all the processes around having to detain and return those individuals. So I know ICAO, and we certainly support the use of technologies such as visible digital seals. That ability for all stakeholders, wherever they are in the process, to verify the authenticity of an e-visa, a digital travel authorization. The final pillar is one that's often overlooked, really, the digital travel declaration. This is the ability for states to digitize some of their process and start making some decisions. The most obvious example of this is the landing card. Countries still have hastily filled in forms done just as you're approaching landing, borrowing pens from people, trying to figure out flight details. The validity of that information is often suspect. It's a great tool for border officers to take that card and question somebody in front of them. But once again, that doesn't lead to a seamless journey. It doesn't lead to pre-travel authorization. Same with things like customs declarations. We can digitize this information now, and authorities can make a decision on how to process you. That could be seamless. It could be applying interventions on arrival, but it gives them the option ahead of ground. So we shouldn't underestimate the power of digital declarations. Once again, something we learned during COVID, and we know the power of that in the next health crisis. I'm not going into the detail of here, but really just what I wanted to highlight here is the benefits that accrue from true digital travel authorization with pre-clearance. Obviously, national security is strengthened. The fact that somebody is not in your airport, at your port, as a suspect, they got denied boarding in the first place. The operational efficiency there, and this is underestimated as well. Every time somebody has to go to secondary processing, that takes away an officer from the primary line. It shuts down a primary control point. And legitimate travelers are funneled into a decreasing number of primary control points. So that leads to queues. It isn't just the security threat, it's the operational impact on legitimate travelers. Good, efficient travel authorization leads to economic growth. It's the ability for tourists to travel easily. I think it was 2 out of 5 travelers state immigration challenges as a reason for not going to a destination. We've got to make it easier for people to travel, to get into countries so that tourism can increase. Airports often measure the time it takes to go from curb to gate. The vital metric, that's getting somebody out of the country. We need to measure from gate to hotel. As one of my government colleagues says, gate to rum cocktail. That's the metric we need to look at. How quickly can we get somebody in the hotels, spending money, enjoying themselves, and importantly, telling everybody else what an enjoyable experience it is, and that increases travel and tourism. So I want to touch on the pre-clearance elements of what do we do with the information and what do authorities do? And this is where something called interactive advanced passenger information, interactive APP. The world's first solution in this space was advanced passenger processing, a solution SITA developed with the Australian government alongside an electronic travel authorization system. What happens in this process is that as you check in, a one-to-one check is carried out on the validity of you to enter that country. That can be for a number of reasons. I'll come on to that in a moment. But a positive message can be sent back to board or not board. The decision is made at the origin airport, not in the immigration hall, not when somebody has already traveled, spent money traveling, is potentially a threat to the ecosystem that we operate in. So the decision is made when they try and check in. If they're inadmissible, they are denied a boarding card. If there are challenges, if there's erroneous information or suspect information, a response can be set back to carry out additional checks. It's vitally important that this tool is used to stop people traveling, clogging up precious resource in the arrival airports. So I talked about the primary use cases there. Again, we always come back to the threats. And obviously, there continue to be evolving and growing threats to national security. So that first threat is preventing those high-risk travelers from boarding the aircraft in the first place. Now, different customers of the SITA APP solution have different approaches. One actually doesn't do denial of boarding for many of the cases. But what they do is they have that information and they can plan intervention. And it's a matter of public record that many arrests have been made, including wanted murder suspects, human traffickers, and people convicted with sexual offences have been arrested as a result of the SITA APP system and that advanced information enabling them to be intervened. The Right Travel Authority, I touched on this already, that ability to make sure that people who are going to be inadmissible for whatever reason, criminality, failed immigration checks before, previously deported from the country, whatever it might be, if they're inadmissible, don't let your precious resource have to deal with them in the airport space. Make sure you deal with them at the origin airport. And then finally, controlling them during the pandemic, controlling borders during the pandemic, and whatever the next one is. The ability at almost a sort of port by port basis to understand who is coming and whether or not they should be allowed to travel and board. I touched on Australia at the very start. We've now moved to a complete electronic travel authorization. Again, it's a matter of public record in the Australian National Audit Office. Fines and repatriation costs were running at 23 million Australian dollars a year before the advent of ETA and APP. Afterwards, fines and repatriation costs were running at 3 million. Industry loves the ability to deny boarding, to export the borders to the origin airport, the origin port, rather than dealing with them in your own country and territory. The Australia ETA, and we can demonstrate it on our booth outside, is that ability to suck the information off the passport, verify it, validate it, and then process it accordingly. The final use case I wanted to mention here is Qatar, the hire card integration. So we've been honored to work with Qatar for many years, providing their intelligence and targeting, their risk and threat management solution. As we all know, Qatar hosted the World Cup. 1.4 million visitors were going to the country, and they needed to make sure that it was secure. So again, that ability to do pre-travel authorization based on not only immigration status, but whether or not somebody had a hotel booking. Obviously, Qatar did not want people coming to the country who didn't have accommodation. They didn't want Brits sleeping on the beaches. What we wanted to make sure that travel was enjoyable. And the World Cup, I think everybody will agree, was a success. That ability to pull all these sources of information together from the hire card, from pre-travel authorization, using that interactive capability of APP to deny boarding for inadmissibles is one of the contributing factors, I think, to what made it a success. It's also interesting that sporting events are a catalyst for change. Indeed, our first relationship with Australia was in 1996, ahead of the Sydney Olympic Games. We were also involved in South Africa World Cup, in the hire card here. If you have sporting events coming up in your countries, perhaps it's time to look at the capabilities around APP and denial of boarding capability and making sure that those events run equally smoothly. Please come and see us at the booth. We can demonstrate not only our interactive capabilities and provide more information on that, but as some of you might have already seen, we have a very interesting artificial intelligence head that you can interrogate various border operations with. Thank you all. Please enjoy your coffee break. Please come and talk to us and have a good conference.